Welcome to our Science of Learning podcast brought to you by the DBE-E3. This is the first series of discussions with thinkers, thought leaders, and people who are focused on the science of learning. Today, I deep dive to understand the relationship between education stakeholders. We unpack the mandate of this EdEco Connect Initiative series, which is to provide a space in which to intentionally foster relationships, connection, and trust within the South African education sector. The program is facilitated by Dr. Robyn Whittaker, who joins me today to discuss why dialogues in this space are important. Welcome, Dr. Whittaker. First question is, who is the target audience for EdEco? Because you are dealing with a very broad spectrum of people, unions, educators, and civil society. What brings everybody together? What is the alignment of individual expectations and organizational objectives?
Fantastic. Thank you, Moketsi, and thank you so much for having me in this space. So EdEco Connect really is a bit of an experiment, but a fantastic experiment. And it has as its target really the connection, invitation into relationality, the attention to the quality of that relationship right across the education landscape, which sounds extremely ambitious because it is what we're really hoping to do is anybody who has an interest in learning and education in South Africa is invited into this space. So that's a vast number of people. And so how we are doing that right now in this experiment is with fractals. So, representatives from multiple different spaces across the education landscape invited into dialogue, conversation, thinking together, relationality, and a space to really focus on our collective overarching goal, which is a thriving education landscape, learning landscape for the country.
Thank you. And the natural behavior of people is to compete. So when you bring people into one space, they will say, this is my title, this is my role in this particular organization. How do you bring people into focusing on collaboration and away from competing and showing off of what their organizations are doing or their titles are?
So I think firstly, it's an interesting sort of assumption that we have that people's natural behavior is to compete. I don't believe that that is true. I believe that competition is a learned behavior. And in fact, a lot of our kind of historic education paradigms have fostered that learned behavior. And so I would contend that the space itself is an opportunity for people to step into and to unlearn that behavior and to step into what actually is a much more natural behavior, which is a humanizing space of seeking understanding, of being in connection, of being able to really open ourselves to each other's insights, to appreciate the perspectives that each of us come to. And there is some learning to be done, but it's a bizarre kind of learning. It's a very simple learning because it feels so natural once you step into it. And that really is the learning of how to be in relationship and be human with one another. So it is a bizarre phenomenon that once people experience this way of being, it's something to do with safe and brave psychological space. There is a commitment that happens on coming in. And it's an invitation into that space. And once people experience that, they want more.
Am I right in assuming that preparing learners for a changing world is a common goal for all stakeholders in the ed ecosystem? And also, is there a particular pedagogy that you promote over the other? Because some are pushing for project-based learning, some are into inquiry-based learning, some are doing problem-based learning. So many vast pedagogies that your stakeholders will talk about. Which one, is there a particular pedagogy that you promote as EdEco?
So thanks, Moketsi. So I think that we often get stuck in thinking that we have competing agendas or we have vastly differing agendas, and part of the work of this space. So I won't say that it's necessarily immediately there, but part of the work of this space is really unpacking what is the central core longing that all stakeholders are doing their work for, because quite often things at a superficial level look as though they are different, or they are differing, or they are focused on different aspects of learning. But if we really spend time understanding what motivates people, what their intent is, in general, that intent is very aligned or very paralleled to one another. And the ways that we do them, the way that we achieve the intentions we have might look very different, but the underpinning longing we have, intention we have, what we are seeking is often very aligned. And that's part of learning to step into this relationality and to really appreciate how many different lenses into quite a profound truth there are, and how beautiful taking this, stopping and looking through a different lens from your own can be, and how that might open up your understanding of how we can collectively achieve what feels at times impossible to achieve on our own. In terms of pedagogies, I think that most of the generative pedagogies would get a thumbs up. And the way of, again, going underneath those, whatever you call your pedagogy, what is the goal? So my personal philosophy is one of humanizing education, and that is an education model which really allows human beings to learn in a way that helps them to thrive, to learn in a way that's natural, that's invigorating, that's creative, that's liberating for them. So I guess, Paulo Freire is obviously a favorite. So, the pedagogy of liberation, but that's not sort of in a military sense. That is in a mind, body, soul, heart sense, liberating our full humanity.
Your members would operate at different levels of the DBE ecosystem. Some are targeting teachers, some are learners, some are working with subject advisors, some are working at district and provincial level with officials there, or policymakers within the DBE. How do we get everyone to work on a healthy learning landscape or ecosystem?
So it's a really interesting thing. And I mean, I'm very, very interested in the philosophy and concept of learning ecosystem, because a learning ecosystem has as its underpinning a real appreciation for the dynamism of the system and for the enormous complexity. And it doesn't really fit well into our kind of hierarchical system structure understanding and the way that most education systems are run, where there's a very clear hierarchy, there are very clear roles, etc. A learning ecosystem allows for fluidity, and the beauty of that is it really helps us conceptualize a system within which there can be and there should be multiple different roles, lots of different areas of focus. The other thing about looking at this as a learning ecosystem is the appreciation that you can't see the boundaries of a learning ecosystem or an ecosystem. It spreads beyond the sight of your vision. And so what becomes important in that kind of understanding is an appreciation of the dynamics of the system. So how do we attend to the dynamics of the system in a way that allows the information in the system to flow effectively and that allows us to work effectively? And a lot of that has to do with how we pay attention. So we spend a lot of time in EdEco on the concept of deep attention and paying attention to those who are closest to you within the learning ecosystem, and to developing that capacity for paying attention across the system so that the dynamic of the system is healthy and works well.
Okay. Final question, Dr. Whittaker. the role of a facilitator in a space like this is very important in holding these different stakeholders. How has your role evolved, or has it been the same as someone who plays a very important role of making sure the space holds in terms of serving everyone's interest?
Thanks, Moketsi. So there's a relatively both ancient and new kind of set of skills that is coming to the fore at the moment. And these have variously been termed sort of collaboration skills or weaving skills. I like the term weaving because it really is about appreciating that spaces that foster co-creative thinking don't just spontaneously occur. They actually require intention in setting them up, and they require a specific, there's a lot of inherent capacity, so they require a specific role, a number of specific roles actually, and there's a lot of research on this. The role of facilitator or host really is an interesting one because you can think of it as a collaboration convener. It's a bizarre role because it's relatively invisible. A lot of people actually have inherent capacity for this role. They just haven't been formally recognized. So in many organizations, if you really stop and you look for who are the people that connect others, who convene spaces for people to really meet each other, be in conversation, learn more about each other, etc. So this role is an interesting one because it shouldn't be one person only. And I think in our EdEco space, part of the goal is to really diffuse the capacity for holding these kinds of spaces, first in this small experimental space, but then the goal is over time that actually we would be able to progressively diffuse our collective capacity for hosting spaces in which collaborative work, co-creative work is more easily enabled and relationality is attended to. Many thanks.